الله 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره الكافرون هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. صدق الله العظيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. My dear respected elders, brothers in Islam, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He alone is worthy of worship and no one else. And we send peace and salutations upon our last and final messenger, Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, we have the gift of Iman that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Being from the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we have been guaranteed, a pathway of success. The only way to success, falah, as mentioned in the Quran, is what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. That true success, falah, is for the believers. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the qualities of the believers, الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. That the people who have khushu in their salah. But this is just a point to mention that falah, true success, is what? In Iman, in being a mu'min. Of course, being a Muslim, a person submits to the adherence of Islam, to the will of Islam. And to be a mu'min is the one who brings Iman and practices upon that Iman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Asr, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that mankind is at loss. That verily mankind is at loss. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the time first and says mankind is at loss. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the categories that إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, except those people who have Iman, and they back that up with أعمال الصالحات. Meaning having Iman is a great thing. And then when you have the Iman, when you have true Iman on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you'll start to do a'mal al-salihah. This was just to mention that what does Iman entail? What does Iman tell us to do, or what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala want us to do with our Iman? And of course, alhamdulillah, we have learned so much that in this month of Ramadan of what do a'mal al-salihah mean to us? What does it do for us? In the Quran, subhanallah, every ayah you read, and you can reflect on it for decades, and for however long. You cannot come to imagine how many advices, how many understandings you can come from the Quran. One of the ayahs we wanted to highlight here today, and it's a reminder for myself that what does Iman do for us? On Yawm al-Qiyamah, a person will truly see what their Iman and their Amal al-Salihah does for them. Why? Because there's a verse in Surah Al-Hadid in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يَوْمَ تَرَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَسْعَى نُورُهُمْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِإِيمَانِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's painting a picture for us. He's making us think. Subhanallah, we have not lived the day of Qiyamah. Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explaining all the situation that this is what's going to happen on Qiyamah to this category of people. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, this is going to happen to this category of people. Subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the glad tidings and the warnings. So subhanallah, Quran is not just, a book for today, it's a timeless kitab. And it's the true kitab. It's the kitab which is upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not changed any word of it, nor any word is going to be changed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, لا تبديل لكلمات الله. There's no changing in the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we know, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this scenario is going to take place, it's as if it has already taken place, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most knowledgeable. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something is going to take place, it has already taken place in the realm of the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no shubha, there's no doubt in that. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, يَوْمَ تَرَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَسْعَى نُورُهُمْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِإِيمَانِهِمْ. That on that day, you'll see the mu'mineen, people with true iman, not just, they have the true conviction. And with this conviction, they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as they were able to with true conviction. يَوْمَ تَرَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the believing men and the believing women. يَسْعَى نُورُهُمْ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِإِيمَانِهِمْ. that you'll see this light all around them. It will be preceding them. It will be from the right, the left, from the fronts. Allah SWT mentioned that these mu'mineen and mu'minat, these true believing men and women, they'll have this light, this nur that is around them. يَسْعَى نُورٌ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِإِيمَانِهِمْ. And then Allah SWT mentions that, it's mentioned, بُشْرَاكُمُ الْيَوْمِ بُشْرَاكُمُ الْيَوْمِ. Allah SWT will give the glad tidings to these category of people. This category of people, the ones who have this iman, they have this nur. May Allah SWT make us amongst those people. Allah SWT says that the angels will say to them, Bushrakum al-yawm, that on this day, because again it's that day of Qiyamah where all the reckoning is taking place, and it's a day which in reality does not feel like a day. It feels like thousands of years, right? Bushrakum al-yawm. And imagine hearing that glad tiding from the malaika of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're saying to us, inshallah, that Bushrakum al-yawm, that glad tidings for you on this day. Meaning, after you hear that glad tiding, what worry is a person going to face after that? SubhanAllah, ulama mentioned that what is the first ni'mah, what is the first blessing into the entry of Jannah? Of course, the ridwan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the biggest thing, as mentioned in the Quran. But the first, blessing, the first, thing you will notice, inshallah will notice, that a person enters Jannah, every single worry that they've ever have had, that will erase from their memories. Why? Because there's no such thing as worry in Jannah. So as you step in, there's no such thing as worry anymore. It's the removal of all your worries. So imagine hearing that. Bushrakum al-yawm. That you hear these glad tidings, Allah wants to give us these glad tidings, inshallah, that we hear this glad tidings and now everything is removed from us, like the worries, the difficulties. Remember, this life is full of difficulties and worries. It's mentioned that this life is like that thing that it goes up and down. A person feels peace at some moments and a person feels hardships at moments. This life is a life of test. We learned that from the deen of Islam. And we don't need to look further than the lives of the Anbiya alayhim salatu wasalam, in particular highlighted the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can there be anyone who faced more difficulty than our beloved Messenger Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Lost his father before birth, lost his mother like at around infancy or at the age of 6, then losing his grandfather, then his uncle, all his 3 sons, his daughters. So subhanAllah, so much trial and tribulation, but again, the iman only increased from there. The iman only increased when the Prophet's light only increased, and his faith, and it was even in more conviction. Why? Because he knew that the jaza would be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reward for the hardships, showing sabr in the face of hardship, all that reward is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This life is full of imtihan, it's full of tests. Now going back to the ayahs of Surah Hadid, it's mentioned that that after this glad tidings is given to the people, it's mentioned, Bushrakum al-yawm jannatun tajri min tahtiha al-anharu khalidina fiha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the ayat of the Quran that good news for you today, the glad tidings for you today, that the Jannah, these gardens, right? The beneath which the rivers flow beneath your feet, you are here to live in forever, there and forever. Meaning after you get this glad tidings, Allah SWT mentioned that the Jannah and the gardens, the rivers flow beneath your feet. You're here to live in forever. ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. And Allah SWT mentioned that this is the greatest achievement. What is the greatest achievement? Because in the Quran it says in many ayahs it says ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ, ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. There's an ayah that continues and then it's followed by ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ. One of the ayahs is وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ, that the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest thing a person can achieve. Remember, my dear respected elders and brothers in Islam, a reminder for myself, we should always look to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In any way, in any portion of life, if you look for that, then you've achieved the greatest thing. And when the Quran mentions the greatest achievement, it doesn't mean just in the akhirah. When a person is looking for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the greatest thing in this dunya and in the akhirah. Sometimes a person will look at a person who's very wealthy, or a person who's become a doctor, engineer, or scientist, and say, wow, you have achieved the greatest thing. Remember, this is a worldly perspective of it. But Islam gives us a dunyawi perspective and the akhirah perspective. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that if you achieve the ridwan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember, when can you achieve the ridwan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? While we are living. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy on us, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on us, then in the akhirah you will see that ridwan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. If He's pleased with us, then He'll show us His mercy. But the place to attain the ridwan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the dunya. After a person dies, can their a'mal continue? No. So it's so important that this iman, I, myself, first and foremost, we don't take it for granted. As soon as someone takes something for granted, that's when you see they start to lose something. Right? When a person doesn't have qadr for something, for example, a person is whole life earning money, they have value for that money. That's why they keep trying to earn it and work hard. The moment they take their job and their money for granted, you'll see a decrease in their wealth. You'll see a decrease in their productivity. So now Ramadan just passed, and if we take it for granted that, I did so much in Ramadan, and then we start to let loose, we let go of the pedal, we start to push on the brakes and we think we've done enough. That's when our decline will start to happen. And subhanAllah, if you see in the history of Islam, that's the way of the Muslim Ummah, that in our past predecessors, the people that lived before us, how much work would they do to learn the deen of Islam and then practice it? And then in the later generations, and may Allah forgive us and protect us, we see that we are part of that generation that instead of learning the deen of Islam, we think it's very easy to just attain this nur. And we think it's very easy, so we don't do the due diligence we need to do to learn the deen of Islam, do the da'wah of Islam, and then preach it, and then practice it, and then instill it to our next generation. So as a point, it becomes watered down. Many times there was engineers who knew how to do some sort of work. Now they're letting the technology do it. So a human cannot replicate the same work that a person was able to do in the past. For example, if you take the example of architecture, right? Big buildings, they did not have the machinery, but they had men who were able and qualified to understand how can you construct this building, right? Similarly with the deen of Islam, the people, the ulama, the scholars, and the Muslims of the past, they understood that for this deen, iman, and all these things to grow, I have to learn the deen of Islam and practice it, and then they build upon it. Today, it's the sad reality that many of us, myself included, that we don't wish to practice, but we wish to preach. So if anytime we're confused about something, we just go to Google, and we don't even know if this is the correct, opinion that's found in the deen of Islam. But yet we think it's very easy, and we think everything is at our fingertips. This is a way that we've only gone backwards. And you would think that, subhanAllah, with these devices, everything is here, and we would have all the knowledge. SubhanAllah, despite having the information at our fingertips, it does not translate to what? Ilm. In the Arabic language, ilm and amal, these words go hand in hand. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made these words, and only one letter difference placement is what separates these two. Ilm. Meaning when you have ilm, you need the amal as well. And without ilm, you cannot have amal. For example, a person is praying before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they have no ilm of how to pray, then their amal is, it's not wasteless, but we want to say that it's not full. It's not being reached to its potential. And then yes, it's being wasted if a person is not trying to attain that potential. And similarly, a person is, doing some amal without the ilm, or, having ilm, which they have knowledge, but they have no use of practicing this, then that the ilm is going to waste. The people mentioned this is information. When the information is put into practice, then this is when it becomes true knowledge. So going back to the initial points, that what brings this, subhanAllah, this nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is having this conviction, and then submitting to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just being a Muslim in the month of Ramadan, not just trying to practice the deen of Islam in the house of Allah, which is the masjid, but taking this deen of Islam to every corner, everywhere we walk, everywhere we turn, and even to the point where everything we think is this in accordance to the deen of Islam. This is a really important reminder in the West, meaning living in America and the Western countries. Many times people will try to dilute the deen, They'll try to make it seem like, oh, you don't need to follow the sunnah this way. This is just a sunnah. Oh, you don't need to, pray your sunnahs, your nafil, you're busy with work, you're busy with this. Remember, they're trying to dilute the deen. They're trying to take away the amal slowly but surely. If you look at the times of, COVID, subhanAllah, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it was almost 4 years ago, more or less. And subhanAllah, the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are closed. And there weren't many individuals worshipping in the house of Allah. Now it's open. So as, true Muslims and mu'mineen, should we not take advantage that subhanAllah, Allah has opened His doors again to us? And it's like it's like another chance, it's like another life again, subhanAllah, in which we can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of our abilities. To everyone's ability is different. Now subhanAllah, look at the brothers sitting in the chairs today. May Allah give them long life and health. Imagine the days they were young and they used to stand in qiyam and pray. And now they're not able to. Do you think they would not yearn for a day where they can do the same as they were in their youth? Again, the true regret only sets in when you lose something. And subhanAllah, hidayah and iman, subhanAllah, it's a thing that when it's not watered and nurtured, it's fragile. There's a dua of the Quran and of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did the Quran mention? رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, it's for us that, oh Allah, do not let our hearts turn away after you have given us hidayah. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention this dua? Because some people say, when you have hidayah, can it be gone? Can it be, But it's mentioned this, why? Because we need to make that dua. Hidayat is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the Prophet yearned for his loved ones to accept Islam. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, that you do not guide who you love, we guide whom we will. And this guidance is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow to keep that hidayah? Is the ones who exert themselves in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're all over the place, but just now going back to the ayah. So the mu'minin and mu'minat, the true believing men and women, they have this nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's given to them because of their iman and their practice of Islam, true practice of Islam. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, see again, it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting a picture before our eyes, a scenario before our eyes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions now vice versa, that this is the condition of the believing men and women. There's glad tidings for them, Jannah is for them, and they have achieved the greatest thing a person can ever hope to achieve. In the dunya or akhirah, both. It's not only just for the akhirah. They work so hard, they strive so hard. May Allah make us amongst those people that they worked hard for that thing, but through the dunyawi means. Again, after a person dies, they can't work so hard. Again, that's the end of it all. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that after this ayah in Surah Hadid, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that يَوْمَ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ, right? يَوْمَ يَقُولُ الْمُنَافِقُونَ وَالْمُنَافِقَاتُ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا انظُرُونَا نَقْتَبِسْ مِن نُورِكُمْ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions then the munafiqeen and munafiqat. These are the people, who outwardly, munafiqeen, it's not just mentioned the kuffar, because there's different wordings. That kuffar, munafiqeen, mushriks. So munafiqeen are those people who outwardly, just for the sake of showing people that they believe, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. We find this many times at the West, that people will say they believe in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but what happens is when they're confronted with these imtihan, these tests of life in front of the mushriks, the kuffar, then what happens is that then they'll change their viewpoint. May Allah subhanahu protect us. It's mentioned that these people, they'll say to these, again, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, it's mentioned that everything becomes clear. It's like a veil is lifted over your eyes. Everyone will be in clear understanding. Will there be any doubt of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is then? Will there be any doubt that Jannah and Jahannam exist? No, there will be no doubt. That's one of the things that's mentioned in Surah Al-Kathir. Sorry, just to mention this point as well, that Aynul Yaqeen, right? This is the ayah of Surah Al-Kathir, mentioned Aynul Yaqeen. And Aynul Yaqeen is like the eye of certainty. So right now, subhanAllah, and it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have not seen Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? We have not seen the Sahaba, but alhamdulillah, through the Quran and Sunnah, we wholeheartedly, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was to give us many more lifetimes, we would always go back to that conviction that there is only one Allah, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was his messenger. Meaning that's the conviction that we have even without seeing. But it's mentioned that eye of certainty is one of the true certainties. So if I tell someone today, that there's these clouds forming and no one's seeing it, then maybe it may be hard to believe that. But when the person sees it with the eye of certainty, then the reality is different. So it's mentioned that Aynul Yaqeen, that the eye of certainty. It happened in the qissa of Musa alayhi salam as well, that he was on Mount Tur. It's mentioned by Mufassirin when he was on Mount Tur, because they bring this in this tafsir, and Surah Al-Kathir, they bring this in, that what is Aynul Yaqeen? They try to describe it. It's mentioned that when Musa alayhi salam was upon Mount Tur, it came to him the message that your people are worshipping the calf, and he did not react. He understood, but he did not react at that time. Then when he goes down and he descends upon the mountain and he sees his people worshiping the calf, then the scrolls of the Torah fall out of his hand. He was in such shock. Meaning when you see something, it's different. But we do not wait to that day to see what is the reality. We as alhamdulillah Muslims and the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we know that there is no one truer in speech. There's no one more true in speech than out of the humans than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he says something, we know it is to be true, and there's no speech truer than the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it, we know that it's done, and we know that it will happen. So we don't wait for that eye of certainty. We have yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the ghaib, the unseen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah, Alif Lam Mim ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. That in this book there is no doubt, and it's for the people who have iman in the ghaib as well. They have unseen. You have not seen this, but you have iman in it. Meaning, if you don't have iman in the ghaib, if you're saying, well, I only believe what I see, then that's not true iman. And it's a reminder for myself. So when you know something is going to happen, when I know something is going to happen, we have to be very careful to stay away from those side of things. So the munafiqeen, going back to them, and so hadith is being mentioned that these people, they live such a life that outwardly they would say they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they had this, distress. They had distress against Islam. They never loved it. They never had muhabbat for it. They never wanted to follow it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that now these munafiqeen, now they're in realization. Subhanallah, now they're all, worried. Because in dunya they couldn't be bothered. And we'll mention the Quran as well, and it gets a clearer picture. These munafiqeen, they'll say to the mu'minin and mu'minat that, please wait for us. Can we have a share of your light? So today, if we're in darkness, for example, it's nighttime and all the power goes out, no one's going to ask, where am I? What am I doing? The first thing a person needs to see is, where can I get some light? They need to see where they're going, subhanAllah. That's why nur is so important. And the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's nothing more important than the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which He bestows upon the believers. Right? So imagine now you're in darkness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. People are in darkness, they don't need, they don't need to know where they're going, they don't need to know where they are. They need light. Then they can figure out everything else. SubhanAllah, if someone's blindfolded and you put them in the building and all the lights are closed, and you take that blindfold off, but it's still darkness, they wouldn't tell you where they are, how they got there, anything. All they need to know is some light, something to, some light to reflect somewhere so they can have an understanding of what's going on. So these munafiqeen and munafiqat, they mentioned that, can we have a share of your light? Why? Because they need that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. We all need that on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So it's mentioned that once they say that, can they have a share of your light? And they say, wait for us, so that we may have a share of your light. And then it will be said to them that يوم يقول المنافقون والمنافقات للذين آمنوا انظرونا نقتبس من نوركم قيل ارجعوا وراءكم فالتمسوا نورا. And go back to where you came from and search for light there. Meaning the light that you're trying to find is not here, go back. Meaning where are they going to find that light? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them that light on Yawm al-Qiyamah, where are they going to find that light? And then قيل ارجعوا وراءكم فالتمسوا نورا فضرب بينهم بسور له باب. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala erects a barrier, puts up a barrier. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts this barrier and separates these two groups. Why? Because the believing men and women and the hypocrite men and women, they will not be of the same group. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala separates them there and then. And باطنه فيه الرحمة وظاهره من قبله العذاب. The batin, the inner portion, is the gate, is the portion of rahmah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place us in that realm. And then وظاهره من قبله العذاب. And the outer portion, which the munafiqeen and munafiqat are, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. This is where the adhab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Meaning, look at the nur, that this nur is taking them to the, to the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the gardens of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the paradise. And when a person outwardly said they believed, but they had no, they did not have true iman, they did not have true conviction, they did not want to spread the deen of Islam, it hurt them to follow the deen of Islam. They thought it was a hindrance. Subhanallah, astaghfirullah. Some people have that. They think that to themselves, by following the deen of Islam, I'm hurting myself. By following the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm hurting myself. By following the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm being left back in the world. But really we know truly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is raising the ranks of the believers through this iman. So it's such a vital part of our nature as Muslims that we should cultivate this iman and make it grow. And why? Because we'll see inshallah on Yawm al-Qiyamah what that light of iman does for us. And it's mentioned in the Quran, subhanallah. And then the ayah continues, يُنَادُونَهُمْ أَلَمْ نَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ. The next ayah continues, يُنَادُونَهُمْ أَلَمْ نَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ. These munafiqeen, munafiqat, these hypocrite men and women will say to who? The mu'mineen and mu'minat. Were we not with you? Now they want to be with the Muslims. Now they want to be with the mu'mineen. In the world, they don't want anything to do with them. When the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, when there was time to assist the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they didn't want any part. They were in the background like, okay, well, I don't need to do that because I don't care for it. Astaghfirullah. And now because Yawm al-Qiyamah is such a place, and it could be such a dark place for some individuals, that darkness is overcoming them, then they say to these people that, were we not with you? Alam nakum ma'akum. And then these people, the mu'mineen and mu'minat, will say, qalu bala. Right? Yes, you were with us. Indeed, you were with us. قالوا بلى ولكنكم فتنتم أنفسكم وتربصتم وارتبتم وغرتكم الأماني حتى جاء أمر الله وغركم بالله الغرور. Yes, you were with us. However, you let things distract you. Subhanallah, here it's mentioned that you let your souls, the nafs, you let that go astray. You just let it go, and you wish for an end to this. The Muslims, you did not wish for them to prosper. You did not wish for them to succeed. And what? You remain in doubt. This is one of those traits of munafiqeen. That when it benefits them, they'll say they believe. When it doesn't, then they'll go away. This is one of the doubts that they have had. And this doubt leads them to hypocrisy. Remember, what is iman? It's having the true conviction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this is haqq. This is the true religion. وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. That this is the true religion, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it to prosper and dominate the whole world. I mean, the deen of Islam will become the light of the world. And it is. It's for those who accept it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show the world. Because the ayat of Quran is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these people will say that you let all this happen to you, and not only that, you let your soul go astray, you wish for the Muslims to end, you remained in doubt. Remained in doubt about what the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the promises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ فَتَنْتُمْ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَتَرَبَّسْتُمْ وَغَرَّتْكُمُ الْأَمَانِيُّ. And you were deceived by, you let the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you just let them go right over your head. The commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were coming to pray salah, to give zakah, to uphold the ties of kinship, and many more ahkam as we find in the Quran and Sunnah. You let all those go right past your head. Any commandment that was coming, you weren't following. You did not care for it. So when someone gives us nasiha, some advice, how they say it goes right over your head. It goes one in one ear and out the other. That's because usually that's a sign of a person who doesn't listen. That's when the person says, "Oh, you let it go over your head." When the person didn't listen, and وَغَرَّكُمْ the ayah mentions وَغَرَّتْكُمْ الْأَمَانِيُّ حَتَّى جَاءَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ وَغَرَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغُرُورُ. And وَغَرَّكُمْ بِاللَّهِ الْغُرُورُ, you were deceived by the greatest deceiver, meaning shaitan. Shaitan told you, he put you in doubt. He said, is there an afterlife? Do you even know what's going to happen after death? Is there even life after death? What are you working for this akhirah? Work for the dunya. So he kept them in doubt until their death. May Allah SWT protect us. And through all that, what he led them astray, and he put them in that category, or he led them to that category of being in amongst the munafiqeen and munafiqat. So subhanAllah, it's such a slippery slope, my dear respected elders and brothers in Islam. If a person has iman and they do not cultivate this iman, they do not have true conviction in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what will happen? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. We can fall into another category of people. And having true conviction is what? Believing that day is going to come, and it will come. And subhanAllah, time is short, so we'll end it here. But if a person reads Surah Haqqa, it's mentioned that people that are given their book of deeds in their right hands, one of the things that they will say is that, I knew this day was going to come. May Allah SWT make us amongst those people that they're giving their book of a'mal in their right hand. And they're saying that it's because I knew this day was going to come. A person only prepares for something when they know it's going to come. A person is not going to prepare for a hurricane or a thunderstorm or anything if they know it wasn't going to come. When someone tells you it's going to come, a flood is going to come, then they stay away from what they need to stay away from. Allah SWT is telling us on Yawm al-Qiyamah, there's going to be hardships for those people who do not believe. May Allah SWT protect us. May Allah SWT give us the true understanding of this deen. وَقُولُوا قَوْلِي هَذَا وَاسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهَ لِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِسَائِرِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ.